Hello there, my name's Tim Walter. I'm a house healer and an alternative life coach. This is the third section of a conversation that I had with my good friend Adrian Incledon-Webber, talking about house healing, about the management, and about all things on the subtle realms of our existence. So the healing mode, right, when you're asking the subtle realms,
Yep.
the archangels, part of that team, when you're asking them to do healing work, how do you express that? So, because what I'm interested in there is, I mean, I know how I do it, but I'm interested in your process, because there's a big difference between saying this is what should be happening,
Yep.
and saying, okay guys, off you go.
I think it depends on what mood I wake up in the mornings. I'm very respectful to them. I must admit, I do give them a bit of stick every now and then, because living on Earth is hard for all of us. If we look at it as we've come here to learn, then we've come here to learn the good, the bad, and the not so good.
Yeah. Okay. So this is your relationship to the management, to spirit, effectively.
Absolutely.
What you're saying is that although you're generally quite respectful, but you do give them a hard time.
I do sometimes.
Most of the time.
Yeah, they get some sort of pretty bad language as well sometimes when I think they're not listening to what I would like. Now, obviously, there's a much bigger picture here, and we can only look at the small bit of it. We're looking at like sort of the excerpt. The what do they call it on TV?
Well, the trailer.
Yeah, like a trailer.
Right.
So we can see the trailer every now and then. We don't see the big picture. I guess if we did, we'd probably, not wish we'd seen it. So really with the Archangel, I tend to really use them as my go-to people. As if you like that, as I'm sort of here on the planet and we've got a job to do down here, keeping ourselves nice and grounded, there has to be a conduit between us and the management, the top man, the divine, whatever. So I tend to use the archangels very much as that, and I'll normally have one specific archangel to do a specific job for me. Now, one of them, Archangel Ferial, comes in, and these sort of wonderful turquoise rays, which I've been seeing even as a youngster, but I never knew what they were. I mean, you don't.
No.
But there's a lot more people, I think, a lot more sensitive people around these days. But I never bothered to ask anybody, because everybody saw the same thing. So he's been around for quite a long time, as is my imaginary friend, who I caught up with again a few years ago. So I tend to use them very much as a conduit, very much as our go-to people, to actually allow them to do a lot of the work that we're trying to do for the family. Not to force the work to be done, but very much use their knowledge and use their expertise to actually take some detrimental energy away from somebody's house and dispose of it appropriately, rather than having it building up in the corner of somebody's room. So I tend to put specific tasks through to specific archangels.
Right. Before we started recording, we were actually discussing the fact that we work in slightly different ways, and we kind of each come to this thing as rather slightly differently.
We have.
And I introduce the team to the issue,
Okay,
and invite them to do their whatever they need to do.
Yep.
You do teach a specific sort of process where a clearing is taking place, and you can ask a specific archangel to do that clearing.
Yep.
I think just in the way that you were saying it, I'm thinking, God, dear, he's a bit full on, being a bit kind of commanding with that request.
Sometimes I can be, but I think you have to let things happen in their own time. And I'm quite prepared to let things happen in their own time, but just sometimes, they use us, so it's quite nice to have that two-way conversation going sometimes. And in most cases, I'm requesting them to do it if it's the correct thing for them to go and do. Now, it may not be at that time, and it's a bit like having that pending tray. Like any healing, if you phase it in over, say, several weeks, it's a much better thing to do. People don't suddenly find themselves coming down with some mysterious bug. You can phase it in, and it seems to be a lot more, it lasts a lot longer if you do phase it in. And so I often say with the archangel, look, when it's right, when the time is pertinent for this to happen, please can you let it happen?
Right, okay.
I'll give them a bit of a reminder every now and then. It's a little bit like having a pending tray up there, or having it diarised. It's put in the diary, and even I will put stuff into my diary as well to say, look, I need to just make sure that what I've asked for, A, is correct, and B, it's going to happen at a certain time.
You won't know the answer to this.
Okay.
The reason I know that you won't know the answer to this is because I know you.
Okay.
Have you got any idea how many hours you spend on each client when you do a full house healing?
When I first started off, the house to draw up a proper floor plan would take me 2 or 3 days. I still kind of like to do it over that length of time, so that for me it's more respectful as well. I could probably, if you like, knock one out within probably sort of 2 to 3 hours, but I think that's kind of disrespectful in many ways. They've allowed me to do that. If I need to do something quickly to help somebody, if they had a specific problem, then I'll get in there pretty quickly, roll the sleeves up and get on with it. But generally 2 to 3 days to actually do the general work.
That's to gather the information, isn't it?
Yeah,
really. So
absolutely.
That's only part of the job.
Yeah. Now I'm tending to find a lot as I do that work. This is where human intent comes into. I'm very much looking at the family. I keep myself out of it completely, and as I know that you do as well when you're doing the healing work, you're looking for the family, the problems they've got, not what you've got. And I think that's where a lot of, if we call them healers, would perhaps fall down a wee bit, because they've almost forgotten to actually look at the problems the family are having. It's almost as though they're putting themselves in the family's place.
Yeah, exactly. It's that old thing of you've got to know the difference between your issues and the family's issues.
Absolutely.
Anybody doing energy healing work, they have to be aware of that point, don't they? Really, that they have to be aware of what their own issues are, as well as working on the issues of the family or the house in this circumstance.
I remember you saying, because it's not something I ever really thought about, because don't forget, I presume trained myself in some ways. I had a sort of few mates along the way, but you said to me, it's a bit like mirroring some of your own problems. When I'm thinking, right, and I think probably in the early days it probably was trying to work out some of the stuff that I needed to work through. And I think as you do that, you become a better healer. You become more of an empath with people. But it is a very difficult one, which is why we were saying a bit earlier, living a spiritual life is not easy. Because, you're I guess, first and foremost, you're learning about yourself, warts and all. And sometimes it's not very pretty, is it? And I think we've all probably done things in the past that not overly happy about. But, if you use that wonderful expression to err as human, forgive divine, hopefully the divine will forgive us for what we've perhaps done in the past. But it makes us individual, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely.
If you look at Tim Walter, say 20 years ago, was very much a different Tim Walter than you find today.
Yeah, 100%. It takes us on to that way of viewing life, right? And I know that sometimes I kind of overthink these things from your perspective, but it's just a different way of looking at it. But there's a way of living in the world which is absolutely about just the basic human being. You basically function on the level, and that's fine. And a lot of people are very, very happy just being a human being, just doing the stuff without even giving any thought at all to some of this subtle energy.
Probably happier in many ways.
Well, it's sometimes you think it might be easier,
yes.
But once you've opened the door, you can't kind of close it again so easily.
They don't warn you about this. It should be like a sort of government health warning on the side of a dowsing rod. Dowsing may be hazardous to your health.
Well, it's yeah. But anyway, there you go. So, so you've got that at one end of the scale, and then at the other end of the scale, you've got people that are actually living their lives very, very happily, but they are what would be classified as highly sensitive people. So they're existing in the world where they've got a lot of impact from the subtle realms.
Yep.
So their experience of life is completely different to somebody living down here as a separate human being, doesn't see any relation to anything apart from their own, their own energy is completely self-contained. So as you start on house healing work, this stuff does come up in exactly the way that you described, and I think it's absolutely appropriate that you kind of become aware of it and that you separate out from it. And I think you're absolutely right as well, is that as you get more experienced and you're finding different clients coming to you with different issues, then you've kind of worked through some of that early stuff that you find facing you, and you're into different territory, really. I think there could probably, if you looked at it from upstairs point of view, you'd probably see the similarities, and they'd probably sitting there going, "Come on, guys, see this pattern."
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, big
whereas
time.
we just don't see it. There's a pattern of us all as a species moving into a dynamic that is far more aware of the interconnected nature of everything.
Absolutely.
And I think that the house healing work that you've kind of grasped, and you've really set a seed somewhere from some. And I don't know how you managed it.
I'm not sure even. Well, a bit of help from upstairs, I think. Yeah.
Because it really is like reality engineering. You're shifting people's perceptions about not only their position, but also you're shifting the subtle energies around them. And I think that the more people do it, that learn how to do this work, then the more flexible and susceptible other people are to it, right? And that's part of why I get so excited about or passionate about actually teaching other people, as I know you do too.
Yeah, you've got to. I think, you get this information wherever it comes from, and it's lovely to be able to pass it on to others. And people have often said to me, well, if you're giving away your secrets, then, it's not the right thing to do. Well, there are so many billions of other people in the world who need healing work done. Then if I sort of say, teach you or somebody else, or you teach me, and it's a bit like the fishing rod scenario, isn't it? If you give people lots of fish, then fine, they feed them for the day. But if you give them a fishing rod and teach them how to fish, then they'll be in food for the rest of their lives. And I think it's the same with what we're doing. It's so important for people to be able to look at. It's a bit like The Secret, the book. It was a big marketing exercise generally, but it's changed a lot of people's lives. And a bit like some of the ghost films or the ghost documentaries on TV. 20, 30 years ago, maybe 5% of the population believed in ghosts, and now it's probably more likely 60% or 70% of the population. So the more that we can do, the more we introduce people to what we do, in a professional manner as well, the more you can actually encourage people to actually look after themselves, to change their thought patterns. It is that little pebble in the pond, isn't it? The ripples are going to spread out and out and out, and their families get it, and their friends get it, and their friends' friends get it. And then gradually you can take over the world. It's a long time in coming, I know, and it's work in progress. But it's kind of part of why we put the book together, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's just the way I only laugh because it sounds like it's you wanting to take over the world. But what you mean, I completely get what you mean. It's about spreading that.
I'm open to it.
Spreading that kind of understanding of our relationship to everything else that is.
Yep.
And things like The Secret and The Law of Attraction and all of these very popular and very well marketed things. We tend to think that they've just happened and that somebody has done that and they've made a lot of money out of that, and wow, dare they? This is but equally you think, well, that's quite interesting. But don't forget, it's all, and I know you're completely behind this thinking. It's all about, it's not accidental.
No, it's not.
That this tide of awareness is shifting. We only need to look outside and look at the state of the biodiversity on the planet, for example. That there needs to be a big shift. Now, of course, as you know, my attitude to whether that is real is actually not quite as solid as some people. I mean, I don't. I look at it that actually, as far as I'm concerned, we are in this information field.
Yep.
And I know you get it because that's the way that you work with it, but you just do it kind of from an innate point of view. You do it naturally.
Sure.
And that's why elementals and the angels and archangels are natural to you to work with, whereas I kind of go, how does this work? What is this? This is it? How does these fields interconnect? Just because that's the way my brain works, I want to try and take it apart and say, what is this? All of this is really interesting.
It's hard though, isn't it?
Of course, it's mind-bogglingly impossible to take apart properly.
Yeah.
But if we look at life and reality as almost like the holodeck on the Starship Enterprise, it could be anything.
Yeah.
And we just happen to be here at this time in this scenario. And all of these things in the world around us that are that are giving signs of lack and fear really are all stemming from our co-creative ability as these energy packets at this time, that we all, 7.5 billion souls of us here, are echoing these sentiments, and therefore that's why this environment appears to be as it is. If we start to ignore a lot of the crap that's around and fed to us, because that's what those in control and in charge want to feed to us, and you start to live from the perspective of your own life and your own interactions, then a hell of a lot changes.
Absolutely.
Hell of a lot changes.
See, we don't watch the news.
No.
We don't read newspapers. But of course, I guess everybody sees things in such individual ways that, I'll look at things and maybe I'm wearing a blue shirt, but you may look at it and go, well, that's green. So of course, everybody is living in their own reality. And, trying to take the stuff apart, really, as you say, you can drive yourself nuts by trying to do it. Are we in a holodeck? Are we in a sort of computer program that somebody else is manipulating? I hope not. I really hope not. You just have to try and make sense of it in your own way without... I think you could drive yourself nuts. Drive yourself mad otherwise.
You can actually drive yourself nuts. It really is a dangerous thing to start to get overly obsessed about. And that is, part of the danger of working with the spiritual subtle realms, is that it can be overwhelming.
Yes.
And, that is partly why, over the eons, the authority was given to individuals who then got together in a club, and that became a religion, and blah-de-blah-de-blah.
Sure.
I mean, what we're dealing with, fundamentally, is just natural human ability. And... all that I see that's happening now in the world in terms of people waking up is that we are waking up to the natural human ability.
Sure, yeah. And it's been suppressed for many, many years.
Absolutely been suppressed, yeah, absolutely. And what's really interesting is that the house healing work is a really fundamental and very practical tool to take that aspect of being human and say, okay, let's do something with that. And it's brilliant.
It is, and I look at it in very logical ways. It really is. If something's a problem, there's always a way to go and fix it. Now, that may be sometime in the future, maybe that'd be quite a way in the future, maybe it's 1 week, 2 weeks, or 6 years. But you can put the building blocks in there. But of course, it is that fundamental change in your psyche. You have to start looking at things in different ways, and you have to change to bring change in. I mean, it may sound logical to do that, but if you just have the blinkers on and just keep walking forwards the whole time, you miss so much left, right, and behind you. And if you start looking at the elementals, you start looking at the planet Earth, the whole thing it's a beautiful place to be. But of course, we just lose sight of it.